Welcome everyone, I'm Anglov the Polish guy, and in this video I will at last continue my attempt at imitating the Ares mission from The Martian. If you haven't watched the previous part, you can check it out from the link in the description. I have to remind everyone that this was recorded in stock Kerbal Space Program, but in version 1.0.5, so there are some issues that wouldn't be present in the current version. So, after the pre-supplies of the Ares mission showed in the last episode, comes the last big launch of the program. The Hermes mothership is an ion-powered spaceship that is supposed to be used for multiple missions to travel from Kerbin to Duna and back. From all the ships in these videos, this one is probably the least performance intensive, but at the same time takes a long time to do everything since the acceleration is lower than 1 meter per second. The launch itself is fairly hard since the payload is giant and needs careful piloting and low angle of attack to not flip the rocket over. One thing that needs to be taken into consideration here is how the Hermes is powered. In the book it uses a reactor of some sorts to power everything, but we don't have such a thing in KSP. Instead, I opted for a hybrid of solar panels and fuel cells. I didn't use fuel cells exclusively because hauling all that liquid fuel would really affect my acceleration and delta V. Solar panels, on the other hand, need the sun to work, and the amount of light at Duna is lower than on Kerbin, so fully equipping the Hermes with solar panels would also be hard. Because of that, I decided on a hybrid solution. With mods, I would most likely use a reactor instead. One of the issues with solar panels is that they don't work if the sun is behind Kerbin. Because of that, I need to put the Hermes into a high parking orbit of 1100 kilometers. At this height, I can manage to complete the escape maneuver just before Kerbin gets in the way. Of course, I will need a better crew transport system because of it, but a system based on the Orion spacecraft would be ideal for that. So, with Hermes in the proper orbit and the last stage deorbited, it was time to wait for my next Duna transfer window. This time I'm aiming for low travel time to make it easier on the Kerbals. Now it's time to get the crew to the Hermes. With that, I am also transporting the last module of this mission, the Duna descent vehicle that will allow the crew to descend from Hermes to the surface of Duna. The rocket of this mission is also somewhat based on the Space Launch System Block 1. The launch and intercept went really well and I managed to dock without much problems. The crew got transferred and it was time to plan my Duna intercept. I managed to get an intercept with travel time of 153 Kerbal days. The maneuver was 1672 meters per second delta V, so with my acceleration of 81 centimeters per second, it will take roughly 35 minutes to complete. Originally, the Hermes has an acceleration of 2 mm per second, so over 400 times lower. It uses way longer burns, but for the sake of not sitting in front of my PC for days to get those done, I had to make some adjustments. As much as I like close recreations, some things would just not be fun. So, after over half an hour of burning, I got my maneuver done. Because of the burn being this long, I had to make some corrections afterwards, since I was way off on my approach. My final burns corrected my periapsis near Duna. At this point I had to limit my engine usage a little because of less power. When approaching Duna, it was time to plan my braking burn. This one took almost an hour because of power limitations. After some corrections, I was in an inclined low Duna orbit. With over 4 km delta V left in the Hermes, it was time to plan my descent. After a quick crew transfer, I detached the DDV from the Hermes. I planned my descent trajectory and it was time to land at last. The DDV is designed to land on its own engines, but because of low fuel margins, I opted for an additional dragchute to slow me down higher in the atmosphere. The final touchdown was 900 meters away from the hub solar array, with one of the rovers docked. Now it was time to step onto the surface for the first time. Jebediah is of course happy that everything went well and proceeds to plant a flag. I think he would be happy even if nothing went well too. The rest of the curveballs stepped out of the lander and I decided to get the rover closer to transport everyone to the hub. The fact that the rover can only see 2 curveballs is an issue, but with some careful driving, the third one can hang on the back. I probably should have brought an external seat, but I thought about it just now, writing the script, 2 months after recording. When I got to the hub core, it was finally time to repair the wheels on Rover 2. My next goal was to fully assemble the hub. The solar array and science modules have wheels for easier transport on the surface. It took a lot of space tracking to get everything close and then aligned to the docking ports on the hub, but I managed to do it. The total assembly time was around 2 hours. I would probably have an easier time of it if I landed everything closer, but in the end the hub got assembled and ready for operation. My first excursion from the hub was towards the initial probe lander that I used to scout out the location. Because of the amount of parts in the hub and rovers, driving near it slows down the game to a crawl. Further out, without the FPS issues, driving with the rovers gets really fun. After coming back, I did some experiments on site. I have no idea how efficient this type of setup would be for science mode or career, but I don't think it would justify a mission of this size. Getting everything set up is the fun part of this hour's mission, but as far as surface operations go, there just isn't much to do here. My next rover trip was towards some debris left over from a landing. I wanted to see what survived to maybe improve on my hardware design in the future. At the same time, I used this opportunity to test my rover range. The only part that survived here was a drug chute piece. When the support structure gets detached, those don't get burned off, so they land as a single part and sometimes manage to survive. This might be an issue in some landings if I don't want to rain debris onto stuff that is already on the surface. I drove for a few more kilometers to the point of having 50% battery reserves. I decided it as a safe margin to be able to return to the hub. Sadly, my rovers aren't able to reach any other biomes from a hub location. KSP could really use some more localized science features other than biomes. For example, something based around terrain scatter. Missions like this, that can reach out a few kilometers away, don't make much sense otherwise unless you are on an edge of a biome. With that done, I came back to the hub. My approach wasn't the best and I had a slight issue of the rover tipping over. This isn't the first time it happened, but this time I decided not to reload the game. Going full on without reloads before would be way too frustrating, but at this point I was close enough to the hub to get this rover rescued. Reaction wheels in the lander can managed to flip it back over and I docked back up. My only damage was losing some batteries and a reinforcing steel beam. As much as I would want to do much more on the surface of Duna, there really isn't much to do here. The terrain is fairly dull, the sandbox mode doesn't allow me to do much science, and the part amount makes the hub a bad place to be in regards to performance. I time warped for the rest of the surface stay. The total surface stay came out to around 30 Dunian days, around 90 normal Kerbin days, which are 6 hours each. After that, it was time for me to get ready for a road trip to the Dove. Since it's many kilometers away instead of being close, as I should have set it up, I needed both rovers for the trip. Both for crew capacity and enough batteries to last the whole trip. It took me around 50 minutes of driving to get close. My battery reserves were running quite low, so I will definitely won't be able to return those rovers back to the hub. I would recommend landing your means of return closer if any of you want to recreate a mission of this type. I decided to leave some flags and last words from my Kerbonauts. Now it was time to ascend the ladder to the Dove capsule. By this time, it's fully fueled for a flight back to the Hermes. I had a great view of Ike while preparing for liftoff. By the way, if any of you want to see some screenshots of this voyage, I will link a full album in the description. As soon as the Hermes was in a good position to intercept it, I lifted off the surface. Discarding the ore mining and processing modules, my rocket was well on its way to space. I think I slightly overbuilt this dev, because it can get way further than the orbit I require of it. When I got into a suborbital trajectory, I planned a maneuver that will get me a close intercept with the Hermes. After the correction, it was finally time to stage the rocket. Initially, I thought the first stage will be ejected while still in the atmosphere, but it has enough delta V to bring me into quite a high orbit for what it's meant to do. This DAF could probably do well on Eve too. A second correction burn brings my approach into 6.2 kilometers. From here, I'm using standard approach maneuvers to get myself close to the Hermes. While docking, I still had over 1700 meters per second delta V left, which really shows how good the DAV is at what it's meant to do. After transferring my crew and data, it was time to plan my return. I'm not sure if I was correct in my planning, but my immediate return required way more delta V than I had available. As much as I could get to Kerbin, I couldn't get into a stable orbit there. Instead, I decided to wait for a better position of Kerbin before departure. That got me a 680 meter per second ejection burn that will get me close to Kerbin. I deorbited the DAV and was left with quite a lot of delta V on Hermes. The burn took around 12 minutes total. Sometime before intercepting Kerbin, I did a correction maneuver to get my periapsis closer to the target of 1100 kilometers. After that, it was another 20 minutes or so to get into a proper orbit around Kerbin. The last launch of this program is a capsule that will bring the crew back to Kerbin. The Hermes doesn't haul a return vehicle with it, because that would be a major waste of delta V. Instead, a separate spacecraft, somewhat similar to the DDV, will come in and get the crew back to the surface. The launch went by quickly and easily. After around 10 minutes total, I was docked to the Hermes and the crew got transferred. After years in space, it's time to finally come back home. I undocked and planned a course that will bring me close to the KSC. The separation of the service bay is done a few minutes before entering the atmosphere. From here, the capsule will descend and land near the KSC. It's a fairly harsh re-entry trajectory. The Kerbals face up to 7 Gs of deceleration. The drug should deploy with its main chutes shortly after. We are landing a few kilometers outside of the Kerbal Space Center. And so, with that touchdown, the Ares mission is concluded. After many months in space, weeks of preparation and over 70 hours of gameplay, I managed to do it. I hope you enjoyed my attempt at this mission inspired by The Martian. If you want to try out my spacecraft or improve them on your own, feel free to download them from the link in the description. Let me know if you want to see more videos of this type from me, because it's really fun making them. With 1.1 and KSP 64-bit released, at this point it will also be much easier to accomplish big missions such as this. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching and I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more. That's it from me today, see you next time!